Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2023 verdict, coming to you live from Abuja and Lagos, from Channels Television, basically. I am Chamberlain Uso.
Good morning. It's getting smoother in the mouth now. Yes, it is. The 2023 verdict. I also have to keep practicing, but this is where we are. Welcome to the program. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Yes, it pretty much comes with ease. It's the 2023 verdict. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
It's so much safer for me. Everyone would have made the mistakes. And all I have to do is tell you that today is the 9th day in the month of February 2023, and we're inching closer and closer to the elections. Amaya Makinde, welcome to the program. Yes, I can just say the program.
Guess what, Aya? We're taking it one step higher from that, your countdown. We've got our countdown, too, for everyone. Look at that. The 16 days, whoa, it's just changed now. 16 days, 57 minutes, and the seconds are ticking to the presidential and National Assembly elections, as a matter of fact. Don't forget that bit. You know, there's a lot of focus on the big one, the presidential elections, but that is your ticker. Well, forget about the S and the hours. That's how it is on their website, on INEC's website. So that is what is going on. To be or not to be, well, as far as we know, as far as everyone else, the information out there, the commission insists this date will hold.
Indeed, listening to the INEC chairman yesterday saying that after he briefed for the Federal Executive Council, they were convinced, and you know, it seemed that they were convinced that INEC is indeed ready to take on this poll. Don't forget that the president has also convened an emergency Federal Executive Council, beg your pardon, no, Council of State meeting for Friday to talk about some of the issues that are also emerging in the polity. So we'll wait to see, you know, whether or not the INEC chairman will also be briefing them at that particular meeting. But while we're counting down to the elections, perhaps some people are counting down to Valentine's. I don't know. Indeed.
Where is CBN when you need them with this scarcity of funds so everybody can be on the same page?
Cash is king. He who's got the cash right now, or she, as the case might be, will be king or queen, as the case might be. Yeah.
What a season it will be when all of this does go on. But don't forget, we also like to remind you, yes, you could always get across to us with our social media handles. Send us comment, emails, tweets of yours. You know how we appreciate all of them when you keep sending them. So take a look at all the social media handles for you here. There you go. Yes, we'll still keep tabs on you know, the regular ones, but those are our handles with which you can get across to us whatever messages you want to get off your chest. So 2023 verdicts, channelstv.com. Yeah, you can also follow the conversation via the hashtag, and then we will be glad to hear from you.
Indeed. So we're looking at the stories right now that are trending for you. We're looking at the stories that are trending for you, and first on the list of the stories that will happen, the expectations which we're hoping to have here, well, which we'll be following for you, not here in Abuja, but all over the country. Yeah. Campaigns are indeed ramping up. The APC is planning to take its campaign. In fact, it should be on its way to Sokoto if it hasn't arrived there already. APC takes campaign rally to Sokoto. Previously, they had done their last rally in Kogi State. It looks like, you know, it's the last leg now, and from North Central, they are now taking it to the Northwest. So it'll be interesting to see how matters eventually proceed. But today, we know that the APC is taking its campaign rally to Sokoto. And
also having their campaign rally today is the PDP. They take theirs to Kano. So you do remember, particularly when they were in Benue, lots of people were looking to see, okay, what's going on, who's here? And that's why you heard some of those leaders announcing the names of those who they say are supporting and backing the PDP presidential candidate. But they are just ramping up their preparations, campaigns generally across the country. So those two are there. Well, yesterday, you had several other parties, the Labour Party, the NMPP, so they're equally. Even the Accord Party also did theirs yesterday, which we brought to you. But today, these two are going on.
Interestingly, they're both in the Northwest. Yesterday, I think the PDP is now done with the Northeast. It's been in Bauchi, it's been in Yobe, it's been in, I can't remember the third state now, which has done its rally in the Northeast. Now it looks like they're moving to the Northwest. But who knows, they might not be holding it as we think, maybe not by geolocation. Perhaps it's more by convenience, who knows.
There you go.
But let us see eventually what happens. Lagos?
What's also interesting about that conversation, guys, is that APC is going to Sokoto State, which has a governor from PDP, and PDP is going to Kano State, which has a governor from APC. So I guess we'll see how it all unfolds. But then, still talking politics, INEC is set to meet today, part of news today. INEC is set to hold a meeting today with university vice-chancellors and the leadership of the Nigerian Bar Association. This meeting with vice-chancellors, for instance, is not a new one. I remember the last election, the 2019 election, they held a similar meeting with the VCs, where the chairman of INEC warned that vice-chancellors of federal universities should not nominate card-carrying members of political parties as returning officers for the 2019 elections. Is it going to be a similar call today?
Looks like it. You know, INEC has a long history and partnership with the academia, you know, in terms of elections conduct, you know, lecturers, vice-chancellors, or members of the academic community in general are, you know, often appointed as returning officers, and it is crucial, you know, for the neutrality of those participants to be guaranteed in the electoral process. You know, but that apart, what's more important for me, I wonder if it will be coming up concerns about, you know, the possibility of 3 million students to be disenfranchised from this process. I wonder if the INEC chairman will be bringing that up as well. I mean, to allow those students have a sense of belonging, you know, in the electoral process. Don't forget that last year, they were at home for about 8 months. So, you know, give them an opportunity to decide their future in these elections.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the length of time that they were at home because of the ASU strike. Because when Markwell mentioned February 14, the first question that came to my mind was last year. That's the very date. Absolutely. That was a love message to the students at the time. Well, Markwell, we get the message both in your words and in your attire.
And in your attire.
So, well, but you know, as for concerning what you said, INEC is very clear about what their own role will be. I think we also mentioned that yesterday in our conversation with INEC officials that came, and the CPS too, the chairman of INEC has also made a statement about that, what the law says. Whatever amendments can be made, I guess we'll wait to see. Also to come today is the ECOWAS Commission organizing a capacity building workshop for persons with disabilities. That's also going to be in the news today. And don't forget, yesterday we had, you know, tweets and messages from a number of people who are asking what's going to happen to people who have disability of sight and all of those things. How that is going to be factored into the elections. I guess that's something that the ECOWAS Commission is concerned about.
And you know, it's a good aspect of the elections that, you know, that regional body is concerned about, this capacity building for persons with disability. I wonder what, you know, what aspects of training will be conducted for persons with disability, but instructive, you know. We've talked about how voter education commences long before the elections start. So we're hoping that, you know, the persons with disability would also be told not to negotiate their commonwealth for whatever the politicians are offering, because it seems as if vote buying has already started before the election, when you see Naira notes in parks carrying logos of political parties.
Oh, really?
Such videos are, you know, all over.
I look forward to seeing that.
It is concerning. Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll wait to see, especially when you talk about them not selling off whatever it is that is their livelihood in the future. Because according to the chairman of the Albino Foundation, Jacob Pella, I think I remember him saying that the voter population has about 16% of them being people living with disabilities. That's not a number to take for granted. Guys?
Oh, yes, indeed. So let's go right ahead and take you through some of the dailies here today. You can almost guess what the headline will be. And why not? Take a look at New Telegraph. Old banknotes. Supreme Court stops CBN's February 10 ban. Yeah, it was the big one all through late yesterday. Look at some of the riders now. Ruling irrelevant, non-binding, deadline stays. Apex Bank. We'll talk about that in the course of the program and here today, this particular narrative. Buhari meets with Emefiele. That's just the bit here, nothing follows. And then the next rider, IMF advises bankers, lender to shift deadline. Reiterates position on unified exchange rate. I know you may be wondering, IMF, what's with, you take a chill pill. But it is here, maybe they know how to get themselves hurt. Tinubu, El-Rufai, Lord Court judgment. Rivers to join suit challenging deadline ascribed to Wike. Police uncover plot to attack banks in Anambra. Not what you want to hear.
Not what we want to hear at all, but deadline or no deadline, we're going to have Valentine's, that is for sure. Well,
there's this one as well at the bottom of the...
Is it on Valentine?
Well, not really, who knows, but it's about INEC actually. INEC appeals Osun Election Tribunal's judgment, so all political this morning. And presidential polls, appeal court dismisses suit seeking to disqualify Obi and Labour Party. So they're all going back and forth. And guess what? There's a new sheriff in town in Labour. Buhari charges new NLC leader, Ajero, to be partner in progress. You heard? That's New Telegraph today.
Well, that's New Telegraph indeed. Welcome to the new NLC president, Mr. Joe Ajero. Certainly no stranger to the Labour movement, having headed the NUEE, National Union of Electricity Employees, for the longest of times. A very formidable force within the NLC. We wish him well. We hope that, Labour will continue to maintain the teeth. Not just not just continue to bark, but, also have the teeth that it has sometimes to be able to put government in check, especially when it comes to Labour matters. Daily Trust is the paper I have for you, and look at what we have. Naira crisis, still on the Naira crisis. Federal government files objection against Supreme Court decision. Buhari receives Emefiele Malami after Apex Court ruling. Experts proffer solution as IMF 6 deadline extension. 2.6 trillion naira in circulation, not too much. You might want to know who's speaking, because that's in parentheses there. It's a page 4 read there, but look at the picture. Just take a look at that picture. It's very...
Continue to spend old Naira notes. El-Rufai tells Nigerians cash scarcity defies Supreme Court's ruling, and cash in circulation may have dropped by 80%.
That's realistic. Let me help you understand. Yesterday, the senior advocate of Nigeria said on the verdict 2023 that what the CBN has done is temporary. It has said, let's hold the fox down and understand first why the chicken is running amok in the forest. So who's the fox and who's the chicken here? I really don't know.
It sounds to me like you're saying the bushmeat and the hunter have a case to answer. Well, right above the nameplate is something related. Naira swap, Wike hails Supreme Court, Rivers to join suit. The details continue on the inside pages. That's the Guardian newspaper this morning, guys.
Well, taking a look at Vanguard next. Old Naira notes deadline. Almost felt like it's raining old Naira notes now. Protests trail Supreme Court order. FG6 dismissal of ruling. Praise Emefiele, AGF Malami for Naira redesign policy. So they're speaking of going to court to challenge all of that. As Emefiele meets Buhari after ruling on Naira swap deadline. Why Apex Court halted CBN's February 10 deadline. To hear Kaduna, Kogi, Zamfara states, February 15. To keep your date locked on that. Tinubu hails governors for saving Nigeria from anarchy. It's not yet Uhuru for vote buyers, LP. Extend all Naira notes deadline. Governors, IMF urge Buhari, CBN. The thing about all of this is that when you hear a certain narrative from some political actors, you need to just read between the lines. I think it will help everyone if we do that and pay attention to all of this. But we already know that several security agencies are doing what we expect them to do, what they ought to do, probably what they ought to do. I like to leave it at that one. But then, look at this. PDP, APC clash over plot to scuttle polls. Where's that coming from? That's Vanka today.
Well, take a look at leadership this morning. Naira swap deadline is what they also have. Governors, CSOs differ on Supreme Court judgment. Credible election under attack. Civil groups declare. Federal government asks Apex Court to dismiss state government suit as governors hail verdict. It has saved Nigeria from anarchy, economic shutdown. That's from Tinubu. So that's what you find on the front page of leadership. You also see the new NLC president, Ajaero, threatens strike over Naira fuel scarcity.
What?
Not so soon, sir. Please, can the elections hold first? Then we can settle down and take a look at
about hitting the ground running.
Exactly.
In labor parlance. Good old Ajaero, it doesn't waste any time, does he?
Oh, dear. Take a look at this. Contempt. EFCC boss must first go to prison before any other action. That's from Olanikbekon. And look at this. There's an update on the Turkey-Syria earthquake. That toll is climbing. It's now at 12,000. Wow. Atiku insists on reopening land borders if elected president. We're going to leave it there for leadership newspapers.
Yeah, that ends a of the dailies here today. But take a look at our story of the day, and we will be back for you with a lot going on here. So all you need to do is just go grab a cup of tea or coffee, whatever you like to do while you cross your legs while you can, because you know how they say in local parlance, you can't kill yourself, can you? But don't forget, we will be right back in just a moment.
Security has so many.
This is what they call 21st century. When my customer say I want to use POS, I will just bring out my phone, open the application, use this, press this code. I don't have anyone that using POS anymore.
Security, but you have the social and economic dimensions of security, which has to do with all these issues that I raised. The issue of going to school, opportunities for people to go to school, opportunities for people to have access to good health, opportunities for people to go into agricultural production, make some money. So as soon as you tackle some of these issues, you find that it will impact positively on security. Of course, the physical security aspect is something that we are going to work together with security agencies, both the armed forces of Nigeria, the police, the civil defense, everybody will be involved. And once we do that, I can assure you that the narratives in Bauchi will change. In the agricultural sector, the production is so abysmal. So what we want to do is to re-engineer the entire process so that production will go up. And once it goes up, you know the impact of agricultural activity on the economy, small-scale industries at the local government level. These are programs that are going to boost the economy of Bauchi State, and in that way help in ensuring that there's security in the state, because the relationship between security and development.
Welcome back to the 2023 verdict. We're coming to you live from Channels Television, as you've seen there. Yes, he joins us now. He's Vice Marshal Sadique Abubakar. He's the governorship candidate of the APC in People's Democratic Party. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
APC.
Yeah, APC, that's what I said.
Yes.
Sorry, APC in Bauchi State.
Yes. APC
Bauchi State candidate.
Yeah.
You know, having attained the very highest level in your profession, your field, why did you decide to leave it to come into politics?
Thank you so much for having me. I think many people have asked me that question, but I think the answer is very simple. I have been managing internal security crisis. And this crisis we've been managing over the years in the military was generated somewhere. And people tend to focus more on the physical dimension of security rather than the social, political, and economic dimension. And these dimensions are actually managed at the state and local government level, mainly. That's where they generate the issues that finally result in internal security challenges. So what I did after leaving service, and my people were coming to me to come and be part of the process of resolving those issues, so that those coming behind me would not have the difficulty of, having to manage the internal security crisis that I managed for about 5.5 years as the chief of the air staff. So the decision really is just to see how I can contribute to the development of my state. How can I add value? Having been in the Air Force for about 42 years or thereabout, what is it that I can come with, to add value to what is happening in my state? And after looking at the requests and the people that have come to me a number of times, I decided that, look, why don't I go there and contribute? With all the knowledge I have, the experience, over 42 years experience of public service, I think I have a clear understanding of what the issues are, and I should be able to add value to my society. So finally, I took the decision to be part of it. I
always find it interesting that military personnel, or should I say ex-military personnel, always find the democratic, experience quite interesting, because they're always very willing to throw their hat in it. But we always wonder whether they're best suited, especially with their background, to participate in a democracy.
Actually, I think we are. Because if you look at all the courses that military officers undergo, it's not just about fighting war. The National Defense College, for instance, if you look at the curriculum of the National Defense College, it's not just about war. It's not just about war fighting. It's about those issues that generate conflict. And that is where governance comes in. To what extent is, what kind of relationship is there between politics and security? What kind of relationship is there between economics and security?
Indeed. So I know that there's a lot of research that goes on, even within our military institutions. But the way and manner in which the military is structured is such that it doesn't brook arguments. Orders are what they are, orders, but not a democracy. A democracy is such that the best ideas must win. And so I wonder, having served at the very top of the Air Force, for instance, where you're dishing out orders and people just have to follow. I wonder if you're not going to find a democracy quite strange, where you'll have to argue and let the best ideas contend, or even perhaps be subject to a state house of assembly as the executive arm of government is expected to be subject to, assuming you were to win.
Well, I agree with you that the military as an institution is a regimented institution where you give orders and so on. But like I said, in the course of your career as an officer, you go through so many courses, right from Command and Staff College. And these courses, like I said at the beginning, it's not just about fighting war. It's about understanding the interaction between economics and politics, the interaction between politics and security, and how miscalculation in any of these fields can generate insecurity, which is exactly the situation we currently have in Nigeria. At the lower level, you have the state and the local governments. If the states, in my opinion, if the states and the local governments are functioning properly, you will have less internal security challenges. Why? Because there's a relationship between security and development. As a matter of fact, security and development are two sides of the same coin. So I think, yes, the regimentation is there, but I mean, going back to the political arena, for me, is very simple because I have interacted with people. I have gone through a course in the University of Maiduguri. I read political science. And I read strategic studies at University of Ibadan. So these are issues, like I said, it's just a matter of understanding that, look, you are no more in a regimented system. You are in a system where you have to accommodate a plurality of ideas. You know, what are the other people talking about? There are a few things that are not really things I expected when I joined the, like having a meeting, you know, you'll want to see where the agenda of the meeting, for instance, which is the way we are structured in our own system. But by and large, I think ordinarily, honestly, there isn't much difference.
I hope you don't find it frustrating. I mean, after
no, I will not.
I hope you wouldn't find it. I mean, because I know military people are used to getting things done in a certain way.
I know.
But after a while, you know, if you have to always get a consensus before decisions can be taken or action can be taken, it is.
Yeah, but I think the idea is to address the issues and the fundamental issues of society: education, health care delivery, you know, empowerment of youths and women. These are the fundamental issues. And if you are really so concerned about that, you should be able to be patient and accommodate the ideas of other people and try to see how you can come up.
But, pardon me, as it is now, I mean, you're trying to occupy that top seat in Bauchi State. And at the center, your party is the ruling party. And now, with the way things have gone with education, security, economy, there are people who think that, no, they're not sure. They don't think that the APC should be allowed at whatever level in the next 4 years so that another party can try. How easy or difficult do you think it's going to be for you in Bauchi?
I think for us in Bauchi, the people in Bauchi are very politically active. They understand all the issues. They understand that they don't have an education system that is functional. They understand that they have one of the highest figures of out-of-school children, 1,400,000 out-of-school children. They understand that about 1,549 women are dying for every 100,000 births. They understand that the attendance, net attendance in schools in Bauchi is only 29.9%, while the national average is 67%. So these are the issues that are really occupying the minds of people in Bauchi. I remember when I went to school way back in the 70s, everything was there. You don't have to be bothered that you are from this family or your parents can afford it. Or we were actually given even pocket money. But the structure that accommodated us that time has collapsed, unfortunately. And that is why you have the highest figures of out-of-school children in Bauchi State. You are talking of 1.4 million.
But are you blaming the current government because they say his predecessor was a member of your party?
Well, well, looking at what is on ground, I have seen that. For instance, I have engaged the current governor. I said, look, when you came, you said you had 50 doctors. How many have you trained in the last 3 years? You know, in the Air Force, I brought in about 153 medical personnel when I started expanding the medical facilities. You cannot have facilities when you don't have people that are trained to operate those facilities. It's not an issue of saying, you know, it was an APC government that was there. What have you done in the last 3 years? That's the question. How have you addressed the issue of out-of-school children? 1.4 million. In the next 10 years, where will this 1.4 million be? Probably some of them will be carrying AK-47. I hope not.
How do you plan to address that?
It's going back to the fundamentals. Look at the way, you know, I had a friend that was given the appointment of Commissioner of Education in Gombe State. And he told me that, look, when I go there, only about 0.998% were having more than 5 credits. So I said, what did you do? I said, look, I simply referred back to the way we were in secondary school. Preps, you know, engage students, have societies, a very active, you know. So the idea is getting the right infrastructure. You cannot have education if you don't have classrooms. You cannot have education when you have children learning under trees. You cannot have education when you have children in classrooms, but they are all writing on the floor. These are the fundamental issues. You cannot have children when you have a school where the headmaster is the English teacher, is the math teacher, is as well the headmaster. I mean, these are things that are difficult to really understand, how you can have a society where people are leaders and they are not really interested. Nobody cares. So what the situation is right now is you have only a small percentage of students that are going to school, those that their parents can afford to send them to private school. But the bulk majority of people have been alienated from the educational sector. They don't have any hope. They can't live their dreams. And this will generate a much bigger problem in years to come. And that is what I don't want.
Well, I was hoping that we'll send this conversation to Lagos so that he will also come into the conversation as well.
Well, thank you, Markwet. The first question that I'd like to ask you, sir, is concerning, you know, some of the issues that you have raised. You know, the experience that a number of people have had over time is that many people who vie for the office of governor of a state do not fully understand what it takes. And consequently, when they get there, it's only then that they begin to understand, okay, these are the issues that we are dealing with. For instance, I'm looking at the multidimensional poverty figures in Bauchi State. I know you must be as concerned as well. But before we go to that specific, do you think you have a full understanding of what you are vying for, not just the office, but the responsibilities that office that you're going to occupy if you become governor of Bauchi State would entail? The economic challenges that the people have, the social life that is not the way one would want it to be, the general lifestyle of the people in the state. Do you think you have a full understanding of what the responsibilities of that office are as at this moment?
Well, I'm not sure I heard the question because the audio wasn't that clear. But catching from what you just said at the end of your remarks is whether I am sure I understand what the responsibilities of that office entails. I can tell you that, yes, I do. It's all about leadership, essentially, and to be responsive to the needs of our people. And the first thing to do in that regard is to understand what the needs are. It is only when you understand what these needs are that you can begin to see how you can work with others to see how you can provide the required leadership, a leadership that will address the fundamentals, a leadership that will provide an enabling environment where the people will have a sense of ownership of the state, where people will understand that governance is about human beings. It's not just about the government house and few individuals around there. So I think with my experience in the public service, having been in the system for about 42 years or thereabout, I have a clear understanding of what is required in Bauchi State to really address those problems of unemployment, problems where people that are employed are not paid salary, problems of where people have been in the system for 35 years or more, and they are living home without anything. These are the fundamental issues that are really bothering our people. And I think with the experience I've gathered in the Air Force, I am properly positioned to really work with others to see how we can address these problems.
Bauchi State is a state in the northern part of Nigeria. And one of the questions that naturally would come is the level of multidimensional poverty coming from the figures released by the NBS. And Bauchi State is no mean one. I mean, 30-something, more than 34% of the people in the state, as you have rightly noted earlier, are below the poverty line. Multidimensional poverty, the figures say. What infrastructure would you say are missing, both socially and hard or physical infrastructure? What are those infrastructure that are missing until now, over the years, that has brought the people so low into poverty, and what are the things that you would do within the shortest possible time to begin to reverse the trend?
All right, thank you so much. I think I agree with you that there are quite a number of issues that need to be addressed, one of which, if you talk of infrastructure, for instance, Bauchi State is an agricultural state. And one of the major difficulties we have is for a lack of infrastructure in terms of roads to move agricultural products from the villages into towns and boost the economy, in that way. So the infrastructure we are looking at, people are more concerned about building government house rather than really providing what is required to stimulate the economy. Agricultural sector is one sector that can bring, if it's really handled properly, it can add a lot of value to the economic well-being of the people of Bauchi State. I was there just last week. I was somewhere around Jama'are area, and I saw the vastness of the land and the water that is available, that if it's really used properly, I think we will have a lot of improvement in terms of the economy of the state. Besides, we are endowed with more than 100 solid mineral resources in Bauchi State, but not much is happening in terms of exploring these resources and making sure that they are utilized for the benefit of the people of this state. Recently, oil was discovered in Alkaleri State, but the question is how many people have been trained to really be positioned to be able to participate in that. These are all fundamental lapses that we have noticed, and I think if we get into government, and by the special grace of God we'll do that, we will immediately go to work and try to see how we can address the issue of poverty, deprivation, disease, lack of access to medical facilities, and of course, fundamentally also the issue of education. Like I said, net attendance in Bauchi State is only 29.9%, while the national average is about 67 or 68.7%. So these are the issues, and I believe as soon as we get there, all we need is to see how we can re-engineer the entire process and come up with a system that is responsive to the basic needs of the people and to get the people to really be involved. If you look at the youth population, huge population, but unfortunately there's no structure that is in place to empower these youths, to give them what they require in terms of skills to be able to stand on their own, to be able to generate resources on their own, and to support their families, and then to support others. So this is another area that we believe that when we get there, we have a very comprehensive manifesto which addresses all these issues, and we have details as to what we intend to do in order to be able to address these issues.
Well, it's good to hear that, but the question of how will always play up. One of the issues that a number of people have said, especially who have occupied the office of governor in different parts of the country, is the partnership with the federal government. And, there are those who would say, okay, so there's the conundrum of the Land Use Act being under the authority of the governor, but what is under that ground is under the authority of the federal government. An instance is that of the oil that's just been discovered in Bauchi State, among one or two other states in the north there. Now, the question here is, how wide is the gap, to the best of your understanding, in the collaboration between federal and state governments to develop the lives of the people? The partnership gap may widen a little more now with the exploration of oil that's beginning in Bauchi State. What would be your steps in reversing the gap between the federal and state governments collaborating to develop the lives of the people in Bauchi State?
I think my understanding of the partnership between the federal government and the state government, I do not see real issues in that. Because if you look at the solid mineral sector, yes, that's where the federal government has a very fundamental role to play if we are to really develop what is underground. But if you look at the agricultural sector, there's absolutely no reason one local government in Bauchi State can feed the entire Northeast. If we really approach this thing professionally and do it with all sincerity. And that is where the problem is. It's not just, even in the partnership we are talking about, there are quite a number of programs of the federal government that are impacting positively on the people of the state, and I do not see any issue there, except that, of course, the current PDP government has not really cooperated in so many areas in order to ensure that the people are able to benefit from some of these programs. They have politicized some of these programs. And besides also, you talk of resources. Yes, it's true, there are quite a number of challenges, but I think if we are transparent enough, if we operate a very accountable system, even with the resources that is coming from the federal government, we should be able to move the state to a much higher level than where it is currently. So the issue of solid minerals, yes, I believe there will be need for real partnership with the federal government so that, you know, we are able to really take full advantage of what we are endowed with in terms of solid minerals. But there are so many other areas. Tourism is another area that I believe, if the state had done well, would have generated a lot of money. Yankari Game Reserve is there, but they have more or less sold it out to people. So these are the issues. What I believe is important for us is to understand what the problems are and then to try to see how we can work with others to provide solutions on how to resolve some of these issues.
Yes, I hope you'll be seeing the need for cooperation in the area that I'm going to be exploring with you. Good morning, Air Marshal Abubakar. I'm also interested in development, but specifically in the area of security. We saw how insurgency dovetailed into banditry and moved further to the northwest, specifically Kaduna and Zamfara. Even though Bauchi and neighboring Gombe seem to be, you know, removed from insurgency, but it's still described, at least one of the two states is still described as fragile in terms of security. I wonder if you're seeing a sense of regional cooperation amongst governors in the Northeast, and if you will be exploring that if indeed you're elected, because they say that, you know, an assault against one is an assault against all. So do you see that partnership in the area of security amongst governors in the North?
I think that's a very interesting question. Partnerships are very, very important. And the regional partnership, or regional cooperation, like you suggested, is one area that I think we can work together with other states in order to see how we can take full advantage of the competencies of each of the states that are located there. Security, generally in Bauchi State, I think we are lucky to a large extent compared to other states. But again, there is a relationship, like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this program, that there is a relationship between security and development. For people to really participate and support the government in ensuring that society is secured, they must have a stake in the process. If they find that they don't have a stake, and that is where, apart, in addition to the regional cooperation that you talked about, it is also important for those in leadership to really focus on those fundamentals. If people do not have stake in the process, they are not likely to cooperate, they are not likely to participate, and they can be mobilized for violence easily. But if they know that they have a stake, their children can go to school. If they are sick, they can go to hospital. If they have youths empowerment program and the youths can see that, you know, there are alternatives on their families. If the women are supported, you know, we have this palliative program. I have a foundation that, you know, provides support to women. We have given them palliatives quite a number of times, and we have also addressed people that are sick, and then have also supported children. Recently, I paid for about 409 students. I paid their NECO simply because the state government could not just pay. So what does it take to really pay? So if you want to handle security issues, I have always insisted. Incidentally, I wrote a project at the National War College. My project was titled Nigeria's Internal Security Dilemma, a need for strategy change. And what I was advocating in that paper was for government to really focus not only on the physical dimension of security, which is buying tanks, aircraft, bullets, bombs, and so on, but to shift attention substantially to other dimensions of security. The political dimension of security, which has to do with a credible political process where people can see that their wishes, what they want is what is coming out. You have the economic dimension of security, you have the social dimensions of security. These are areas that we must keep a very close watch at if we are to really have a secure society. So I agree with you, the issue of regional cooperation is going to be very interesting and is going to be very helpful. But in addition to that, as leaders, we must really look at the issues of education, we must look at the issues of health, we must look at the issues of empowerment of youths. That's the only way that these people, I mean, people will feel they are part of the process, and they will work hard to ensure that we have a very secure society.
Your campaign, or your, will I say, your bid to your ambition is not going to be done in a silo. Currently, right now, for a number of Nigerians, it's been a period of hardship in terms of the fuel scarcity across the country, and then, very strangely, the Naira scarcity. How do you intend to convince people that the party on whose platform you're standing really means well for them, and that, you know, given what it has done centrally, that it can do better, if it can, in Bauchi State?
I think the issue of fuel scarcity and all that are issues that are handled at the federal level. I understand, I agree with you that I'm not going to operate as an island. Whatever is happening everywhere has a way of affecting what we are going to do. But I believe that the APC administration that is going to come in under Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu will add a lot of value to what is currently on ground. Looking at the pedigree of the presidential candidate, having served in Lagos, and haven't seen how he has transformed Lagos. Everybody, there is general consensus that he has done extremely well in Lagos, no matter what. So we believe that, and similarly, the vice presidential candidate, Shatima, was in Borno State. I had opportunity to meet him quite a number of times, and I've seen him working, adding a lot of value to his people. So I believe this team will add value to what is on ground. By the time they get there, they will begin to address some of these issues. They will add to whatever President Muhammadu Buhari has been able to do in the last 7 or 8 years. And I believe that Nigerians need to have confidence in the party APC. I believe with the people that are coming in there, they will certainly add a lot of value. You're
talking about people that are coming in. We're talking about the people that are currently there, because if a party is going to be campaigning, I mean, interestingly, we do not recognize independent candidates. It's still what a party has done. What it says it will do in its manifesto. Yeah. That's how people vote. Well, sometimes they look at the individuals, but oftentimes they go with the party. So if right now they're saying, oh, we're experiencing, this is the level of hardship we're experiencing under this party, what is the guarantee that they'll be looking at your party? In Bauchi State in particular?
But I know that also Nigerians are aware that this federal government, the APC government, has done a lot. It's not just about fuel scarcity. I mean, in the last 8 years, is that all that we have seen? In the agricultural sector, so much has been done. In development of infrastructure, so much has been done. The rail system, you know, in the military, where I just left, the Air Force, for instance, we have procured about 23 fighter, we have procured about 23 procured and inducted 23 aircraft in the Nigerian Air Force.
How has it impacted their lives in terms of security?
Of course it has. Prior to 2015, bombs were exploding everywhere in Abuja. There were 2 explosions in Yanya. There was an explosion in the police headquarters. There was an explosion in the United Nations headquarters or somewhere.
Those were in the beginning days of insurgency.
But remember, what I'm saying is that we should not just close our eyes to all the positive sides of the APC government. The APC government has done substantially well in dealing with some of these issues. Yes, some other issues have come up, such as banditry, which were not there at the beginning, but there were over 22 local governments that were under the control of insurgents. In Goza, the Emir's palace was the headquarters of the caliphate. But today the Emir is in his palace. So I know there are challenges. I'm not trying to close my eyes to those challenges. But we must, as you look at the negative sides or some of the setbacks that this government has has faced, we must look at the positive sides as well.
All right, we're winding down now. Just quickly, I mean, when you were speaking earlier, you spoke about the mineral resources and things like that, but how do you plan to leverage on them, because they're still under the exclusive list?
Yes, I agree. All that we need to do is to talk to the federal government. One of your guys just talked about the collaboration between state and federal government. And that is what is required to really tap into all this. Like I said, we have over 100 mineral resources. Okay. It's not just oil and gas.
Yeah, but do you have the support of a former governor, Mohammed Abubakar? Because I understand you called for a meeting, a dinner. He didn't show up. Instead, he endorsed the current governor, Bala Mohammed. What's going on?
No, I don't think he endorsed him. Yes,
what happened?
There were some issues, and I understand my senior brother, Emi, is somebody that is really supportive of what we are doing. We were together with him during the flag off ceremony of Asiwaju in Bauchi. He has even prepared an office which is donating to the APC. So, you know, there were a bit of issues here and there, but sometimes in human relationship, yes, you should expect that it's not every time that things will work out well the way you want them to work out. But I can tell you that he didn't endorse Bala Mohammed.
Okay. All right, there you go. We thank you for coming on. Former Air Vice Marshal Sadique Abubakar, former Air Marshal Sadique Abubakar, former Chief of Air Staff at the highest level, now seeking to be Governor of Bauchi State under the APC. Thank you for coming on, and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Well, back in just a moment. Stay with us.
The Supreme Court is filled to its capacity with lawyers as the court entertains an ex parte motion filed by 3 states, namely Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara states. The states are challenging the February 10 deadline of the Central Bank of Nigeria, when the old 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira notes are expected to lose their status as legal tender. They maintain that the 10-day extension by the federal government is still insufficient to address the challenges trailing the policy. Moving the application, counsel for the applicants, Mr. Abdul Hakim Mustafa, urged the Apex courts to grant the application in the interest of justice and the well-being of Nigeria. Mr. Mustafa held that over 60% of Nigerians who do not have bank accounts do not have access to cash. And the number of citizens who do have accounts cannot access those accounts, as most of the banks have closed operations because of the policy. In its ruling, the Apex Court held that after a careful consideration of the ex parte motion, the application was granted as prayed. It made an order of interim injunction restraining the federal government through the CBN or the commercial banks from suspending or ending on January 10, 2023, the time frame within which the now older version of the 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira notes may no longer be legal tender. The Apex Court held that this would be in place pending the hearing and determination of the applicant's motion on notice for interlocutory injunction.
We invoked the powers of the Supreme Court to hear this application. The reason for it is that as well-intentioned as this policy of federal government of redesign is working hardship all over the country, as we can all see, banks are being harassed, Nigerians are suffering needlessly, especially the downtrodden. Those in the urban areas, they're having problems, but it's more excruciating at the rural area. So these 3 state governments, Kaduna, Zamfara, and Kogi, deem it fit for us to invoke the powers of Supreme Court to intervene.
The court, in its wisdom, decided that something must be done because of the urgency. But the court has acted rightly in its own wisdom, directed that all processes must be there by 15th, that is Wednesday next week, for us to argue our various positions.
The court subsequently adjourned to February the 15th, 2023, for hearing of the substantive suit.
welcome back. Apologies for that mix-up there, but we do have Mr. Chukwuma Machukwume, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, I beg your pardon, yes, and former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Imo State. So apologies for that mix-up. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so many just wonder, the law. What will the law not do to us in this country? Now, I hear lawyers even argue that, wait a minute. Some say, yes, the apex court is in order, while others think, no, they don't think the Supreme Court should be the court of first instance for this kind of matters. They think it's the High Court. They think differently about that matter. But this is where we are today. What do you think of this?
The issue is a little bit complicated.
Oh. Okay.
In that a good idea was done in a wrong way, and precipitating all these issues now. I agree. Section 251 of the Constitution said Federal High Court has exclusive jurisdiction when it comes to banking and currency. That's the Federal High Court exclusive jurisdiction. You also are aware that Section 243 of the Constitution said Supreme Court has original jurisdiction where there is an issue or dispute between state government and federal government. So these are the things before us now. On the basis of the 251, the Federal High Court has, I think last week, issued an order against CBN.
Yeah.
So that order is still standing. And now the Supreme Court has issued an interim order. So it's a complicated matter. I think by the time on the 15th, more issues will come up. First, there will be this issue of an order. CBN is involved. If you look at Section 2, subsection 3 of the CBN Act, it made them an independent body. And then I remember this case of Jegede versus INEC relating to Ondo State governorship something, where the Supreme Court said, if you are not a party before me, an order cannot be made. So I understand that Section 20 says that you can redesign Naira without the approval by the president. The fact that the president gives approval, it thought is for the lawyers who now iron it out, whether it's enough to only sue the president without CBN. Because CBN is not a party in that matter of yesterday, and it cannot be. Because once a non-state actor and federal government is involved, Supreme Court will no longer have jurisdiction. So as long as CBN is not a party in that matter, I guess some complications will be coming up.
But wait, well, from looking at all of these matters, as you say, complications will come up. How do you think that the courts, perhaps maybe rightly so, what kind of consideration would they give to the fact that we have an election to prosecute in less than 2-3 weeks or thereabout? So how will those expedited action happen in this case? Do you see this being concluded before the elections? Because many say that whether or not to hold elections at this stipulated time is hugely dependent on these cases.
I think when these things are coming up now, one is trying to see this issue of redesigning as a little bit what happened in 2015 of Chibok gas.
Oh.
Chibok gas. I'm sure if we don't take time, maybe the mathematics and the thinking may not be what exactly we are seeing now. Because first and foremost, this redesigning started on October 26. That's when the CBN governor said October 26 that is going to start redesigning. Look at what redesigning of currency has cost in the international fora. In 2018, India started redesigning a system and gave a timeline of 16 months, or of 6 months. What did it cost? It cost the greatest havoc to the Indian economy. They were thinking of trying to shrink this money in circulation. As at the time the decision was done, 18 trillion was in circulation. By the time they finished it, 20 trillion was in circulation. So, our own is even going to be more problematic because there was no proper planning. It just started on October and said by December, new notes will come up. By January 31st, new old ones will be off circulation. That's not proper planning. I think that while we should give kudos to the governor of CBN, I think he mishandled everything. A situation where CBN is supposed to have been concentrating on the physical, monetary, and economic policy. The governor was busy trying to contest election, trying to be a APC presidential candidate, a governor of CBN.
But is it
this time it was using to have done all these things could have been used in planning this thing properly.
But where do we then, the role of the institutions, because he's one person. So there's that institution of the CBN, and then you have banks as well, who are supposed to also be outlets for all of this. So when you say CBN mishandled it, is that the way it really is?
Certainly. There's no way you would have been expecting. Because there was a question they asked me now about election. Yes, election is coming up. Yes, election is coming up. But election, it doesn't need a liquid cash for you to be doing it. If these things have been properly done, because there's also another aspect of this, the aspect of trying to draw out cash so that politicians will not go on vote buying. Vote buying has become a part and parcel of what we are going through.
That's a speculated reason.
Not speculated.
Is that, but
not speculated.
And they say that is their reason.
No. That's, whether CBN said it or not, it is a reality in our Nigerian politics. Where you now keep buying votes, you can't buy votes with transfer. You can only do it by liquid cash. So that's what Nigeria have been going through, and we have seen it turning our voting, our electoral system into a mess. There's need to have forestalled it, but then it would have been done quite properly. It would have been done with a fine roadmap. As at now, starting it October, ending it to this, has brought in a lot of crisis. And CBN, you cannot say because it is only one man. Yes, it is only one man. Why do we blame the governors? Why do we blame the president if things are going wrong? The head has a control. So the fact that he was busy doing pontificating all over the place, he wants to be a presidential candidate, he wants to do this, when there is a big work to be done.
Mr. Machuku, you know, some people have left the realm of legality now, and it looks like we're in the realm. Because, I mean, some people will say they never saw him buy that form. Yes, there was a challenge in court, and yes, you know, the rumors were very strong that indeed he could contest. He did not end up contesting. He wasn't a part of the primaries of the APC, was he?
The fact is, look, they said you cannot worship two masters at a time. By the time you are contemplating and making efforts to buy form to become a president, there's no way you can still devote your time to what...
The point I'm making is that is still in the realm of speculation, Mr.
I wonder.
We do not exactly have concrete facts to that effect. But, I mean, that's on the side. Let's look at the legality right now. Let's look at what it is that we have before us, which you say is very complex. Yeah. The Supreme Court has, because they've said, oh, the Supreme Court hasn't exactly decided. What it has said is stay action until the 15th of February. Is that what it is? Because this is me trying to interpret legal language into layman terms. Is that what the Supreme Court has said?
That is what it is. What they have done, what the Supreme Court had done yesterday was to give an interim order. Interim order is just an order where the other party has not been heard. Just because of exigency. Exigency, yes. But then I was thinking that this problem has started quite long ago. But then the most important thing is that there is an interim order. Now for parties to come on the 15th, so all parties interested, I just heard now that even a state governor is joining. He's trying to join in the suit. The federal government is also maybe also preparing to join, or to file their papers. Mm-hmm. So more issues will now come up. Things will now be put on the table. All the parties will now be heard. Whether the Supreme Court has jurisdiction, it will be tackled.
So, but the thing right now is, the tricky thing right now is, as you rightly pointed out, the CBN is not a part of this suit. True or false?
It's not a part of the suit.
Exactly. And then we have a February 10 deadline looming. The February 10 deadline, or the 10 days extension, I think expires on February the 10th. But the Supreme Court has said, wait till February the 15th before. So it would seem that by some fiat, there has been an extension by default. Is that what has happened?
I'm not seeing any extension by default. Huh? I'm not seeing any extension by default. Okay. What is actually going on is issue of whether the old currency will still continue to be a legal tender or continue to be used. In the first place.
Till the 15th.
Yes. The election is coming up on the February 25th. Is INEC saying that they need raw cash?
No, INEC is not a part of this. I'm not talking about the elections. Yes. I'm talking about the deadline which the Central Bank of Nigeria set. Recall that before now, January the 31st was the deadline by which all old notes should have been out of circulation. Correct. And only new notes should be in use. The CBN, in its wisdom, granted an extension of 10 days. Correct. Now, if the 10 days expires on February the 10th, yes, February the 10th from the 31st of January, and the Supreme Court of Nigeria is saying that we will hear the matter on the 15th of February, hasn't that granted an extension by default? That's the question I'm asking.
It has granted extension. It has granted an extension. Maybe not by default, but maybe not use your language by default. The Supreme Court has given an order. All it means now is, if on the 15th, the Supreme Court hears and determines that CBN is right, of course, automatically, as at the time of the judgment of the Supreme Court, the order of CBN goes in and continues.
Because some people will say that this is very tricky, knowing that the CBN is not a part of that suit, cannot be a part of the suit by the 15th. The legal opinion that said that order given by the Supreme Court is of no effect that it has, because the CBN is an independent and autonomous institution.
I think I would not really toe that line, because the principle that a court order, no matter how silly it is, stands until it is set aside. All we can do is, by the time federal government comes into the matter, he will now play out his card by saying, the order you are given, I might not be able to carry it out. The organ that ought to do it is not before you. It has to be canvassed, and the court has to rule on it. But we cannot say, because the CBN is not there, and then it should ignore the Supreme Court. I cannot canvass for that.
So in other words,
so what we're saying is, it is until 15th when the whole thing is brought before the Supreme Court. Probably by the time this issue, the order was made, maybe that argument of CBN not being a party was not canvassed before it. Maybe there were some other exigencies that were pulling. So one cannot please say, CBN, go on with your
whether or not
start to breeding anarchy, and you cannot spite Supreme Court.
So that then means literally out there on the streets, after February 10, people can still go on utilizing the old Naira. It is still a legal tender.
That is what the Supreme Court just said yesterday.
All right, let's bring in our colleagues from Lagos.
All right, Mr. Machukwume, good morning, sir. I noted that you argued to the point, or you clarified the point about how the Supreme Court can rule on matters relating to, or that have to do with the federal and state government. But when it comes to currency, it has to do with the High Court. It's the High Court that has the jurisdiction. I hope I'm not mistaking on that. And in relation to that, this matter is between the federal and state governments to the extent that it has to do with the country's legal tender. And it has come in some sort of conflict between the federal and state governments. So to that extent, does it fall within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court?
You see, it was like an argument that happened some time ago. You see, the Federal High Court has no jurisdiction over land. But there was this argument that if there is an issue of liquidation, which is exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal High Court, whatever that comes in within the baggage of that liquidation, and eventually inures a jurisdiction to the Federal High Court. Yes, I said the issue of currency and this thing is that of exclusive jurisdiction of Federal High Court. But here is a situation where the state is having a dispute with the federal government. Unfortunately, the three states are all APC states, but that's a different ballgame altogether. Now the states are saying they have a dispute by the exclusive jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, or original jurisdiction. Once there is a dispute between a state and federal government, no matter the nature of the dispute, it has to be tabled before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has to decide on that. So what we are having now is a little bit conflict, but it does not mean that by the time they canvass it in the Supreme Court, by the time all the parties are before the Supreme Court, then the decision will be made, whether that is on the basis of that, of the dispute between just the states, the federal government, the Supreme Court will have a jurisdiction on it or not. So it has to be decided. I'm sure it is one of the issues that will be burning before the court on the 15th.
Speaking of issues, the Federal Capital Territory High Court has ruled that the CBN should not interfere with that February 10 deadline. That would seem a ruling at variance with the Supreme Court. How is it going to play out? That of the district came first in time. The dispute in the matter in Supreme Court was not on by the time the court gave that order. The FCT High Court court gave that order. So I do not think the court didn't want to face Supreme Court because there was no dispute to the much I know. There was no matter pending in Supreme Court by the time that order was made. We became aware of this matter yesterday after the ruling. So I'm not too sure that there is insubordination or whatever as regards that. Now, if the currents... I wonder whether if that matter was also cited to the court by the time the order was made yesterday. I think all this will play out on the 15th. Okay, so if the currency continues to be on the table, if the old notes continue to be legal tender after February the 10th, would it constitute an issue at the Supreme Court on the 15th of February, at least by the defendant? You see, the Supreme Court has given an order. I don't see anywhere any person can start talking about the old note not being a legal tender anymore, because there is a court order saying continue to use it until 15th, when everybody will be heard. So on the basis of that, I'm not seeing any controversy on that. And the court order has been made, and it has to be obeyed. So there's a court order.
How then do you situate the position of the AGF's counsel, where they said in response to that Supreme Court ruling that the claims or reliefs are not against the Federation, but the federal government and its agency, the CBN?
the federal government of Nigeria is distinct from the Federation or the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The plaintiffs have no grievance whatsoever against the Federation of Nigeria. Help us understand that.
It's another version of the story. But being a version does not take the whole day. The people that went to the court also have their own arguments. It is until when these are canvassed before the court, and the court hears them, and the court will now do a determination. So it will not be proper for me to start a review on a matter that is already before the Supreme Court. It is until that one is these things are canvassed, then the court will take a decision. So on the 15th, these things will come on the table.
Is against the background of the fact that as at this moment, there is still that confusion, or as some newspapers put it, division between whether or not the Naira, the old Naira notes remain legal tender beyond February 10. So especially again, because as you just rightly heard and which you're aware of, the federal government has also gone to the same Supreme Court to tender this particular thing that we just cited to you through its counsels. So to that effect, is this, and there are those who would also wonder, okay, so the CBN is not joined in this case, but the federal government, headed by the president, who is the boss of the CBN, is joined in this case. What does that imply? Is it an order, direct or indirect order to the CBN?
Yes, I think I tried to analyze this at the early time. I'm not very sure that the president is the boss of CBN. I think that because if you look at Section 2, Section 1, Subsection 3 of the CBN Act, it says the CBN is an independent body. But then, Section 20 says if you want to redesign and withdraw, you just have to look for approval. When you get the approval, I think that is only just to give a skeletal approval. It does not go into saying this is the time lag, the timeline. I think the timeline issue, which is what is burning now, is exclusive jurisdiction of the CBN. Issue of timeline is exclusive jurisdiction of the CBN. And that's where I am thinking that on the 15th, maybe the solicitors to the federal government, the counsels for the federal government, will now come up with all these arguments. But as at now, there is a court order that set the old Naira notes continues to be a legal tender until 15th, when matters are now put before, completely and comprehensively put before the Supreme Court.
Okay, just to be clear, the CBN, if you say that the CBN governor is, the president is not the CBN governor's boss, to whom then does the CBN governor report? Who monitors the activities of the CBN? And you rightly put it that unless the president approves the Naira or currency change, it cannot happen. If the president disapproves, is it possible for the CBN governor to continue?
No, said he must have to sort his approval. And having sought it and it's given,
what if it's not given? What if the approval is not given? What if the approval is not given by the president?
I remember when there's this issue of when the Federal Minister of Finance said my approval was not sought. I think CBN made a comment, a press release, and said I only needed the president's approval, and the approval had been given. So, having gotten the approval to redesign and to withdraw the old note, it is now for CBN now to set the timeline for doing all this. It is not the redesigning that is in dispute now. It's not the withdrawal that is in dispute now. What is in dispute, what is burning now is timeline. timeline, which is exclusive jurisdiction or the decision of the CBN. It is the timeline that is burning now. It is the timeline that went to Supreme Court, not the approval to redesign or withdraw.
Well, it will seem that
So
all of the issues are.
I'm thinking that
it will seem like all of the issues are connected, timeline or the redesign. But is there anything, please clarify for us, Senior Advocate, is there anything in the CBN Act that compels the Apex Bank to allow the old and the new currencies run concurrently until the old currencies are withdrawn from circulation over a period of time? I ask this because, you know, many would cite how in Western countries that is the case, and how old notes, you know, even from you know, past regimes remain legal tender even now.
Yes, I thank you for that comment. Very brilliant one. But let me get you to US started their redesigning in 2011 and is going to come on stream in 2026, 15 years. That's where things are properly planned. The CBN has the power to set their timeline. What I have been saying is this thing was done a little bit in a hurry. This thing would have been started quite long ago. And most importantly, the problem of at the rural area, I don't think people factor them in. There should have been a situation where these POS and all the rest of them, the rural area should have been, I mean, sensitized properly enough so that this process will go seamless. The CBN has the power, but the power has to be used with common sense so that a crisis of this nature will not come up. A situation where the money is printed and you don't know where they are, it doesn't show good supervision. You are talking about, right now, what the CBN is saying is that out of 3.23 trillion of cash, 2.73 are off the bank votes. 2.73 trillion are not within the banking sector. And this is what is creating the problem, which they want to withdraw, so that it will not be available to corrupt politicians who want to use it in buying the vote. We cannot continue this idea of vote buying. Vote buying is ruining our economy, is ruining our political system, is ruining the developmental efforts. Wrong politicians come into office because they have cash to buy votes. So why this design, I think, was meant to attack this, I think also there should have been an arrangement to have done it in a more properly orderly way.
What would that orderly way be?
The orderly way should have been to have started it quite early and then to monitor the way the money is going and to make sure that the rural area also are brought into this cashless economy. The POS is now sent into the rural area, and then they will be educated and informed on how to use them. After all, the money is still yours, whether you use it in cash or use it by cash transfer. It's still yours. That's why this issue of when there was this argument of whether the federal government, the CBN, should monitor how states hold their money, that doesn't make good sense. You cannot, because it is your money, you continue to hold billions in cash. How does it make sense? Look, because of this cash transfer, armed robbery on the road, stopping vehicles, stopping luxurious box has stopped. Because people are no longer carrying cash. If you stop them, all they will tell you is there's no cash with them. Yeah, but and armed robbery along the road has stopped.
But they started kidnapping the people.
Now, I think if we manage this thing very well, when the cash is not there, And you know that no matter what you do, the gentleman, he has want to give you, but he cannot give you, he doesn't have the cash to give you. And by the time he does a transfer, it becomes stressable. Some of this problem may wither away. You don't see so much of this in the Western world because they have taken care of transfer. Let us inculcate it.
Yeah, as we wind down on this one, from your wealth of experience and knowledge, you've talked about so many complications will come up. What do you see happening at the end of the day?
What
do you see happening at the end of the day?
You see, that's why I brought in this issue of the ugly incidents of Chibok gas. Chibok gas was used to do the election of 2015. Chibok gas.
How do you mean?
Yes. Chibok gas was used to do the election of 2015.
Human beings?
Chibok gas.
Are you saying that politicians kidnapped them?
The kidnapping of Chibok gas was aimed at 2015.
How is that connected with this one?
I hope the crisis brewing, the crisis coming up from this cash management, this cash, the design and all the rest of them, it's not meant to achieve an ulterior motive for 2000.
Are you saying they're using the courts, or the courts pliable?
Whatever. I mean, when people plan, they plan it and they execute it and whatever. We didn't know what Chibok gas was all about until after the election. I do hope that this issue of redesigning will be properly managed in such a way that the sovereignty of Nigerian voters will not be taken away.
So we cannot exactly tell how
where this thing is going. We cannot, no.
All right, Mr. Chukwuma Machukwume is a senior advocate of Nigeria, former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice for Imo State. Thank you for coming on, and all the best, sir.
Very grateful for having me.
We will be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Professor Ademola Abbas joins us for this next conversation. He's a professor of international law, and he's also a global affairs expert. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's make this a relay. Let's start from where we just ended. You're a professor of international law, so you should be able to speak to the Supreme Court ruling, the issue of the federation and federal government, which is like a response of the Attorney General of the Federation to it. Start with the Supreme Court ruling and some of the comments that you heard from the SCN who spoke with us earlier.
Thank you very much, and nice seeing you, both of you. Happy New Year, and to your colleagues in Abuja, Marpe and Chamberlain, because I've not been here since the year started. Well, look, 3 state governments went to the Supreme Court. But don't let's forget it to seek an injunctive order. It's an injunction restraining the federal government from going ahead with the February 10th ban, so to say, on the old currency. Isn't the right of the state to do that, number one? Let's start with that. Now, but we shouldn't also forget that the order they sought was an injunction, which was granted, it's an interim injunction, granted ex parte, which means it's to the knowledge of the other parties. And normally a court
will look at when you bring an action for an ex parte or interim injunction, is there an overwhelming thing that you want to avoid so as not to bring the other party against whom you are procuring the order into the court? And the court felt at that point in time, and if you go back to what the three governors, government actually brought forth, they talk about impending anarchy, that if the Supreme Court didn't act in time, because of the chaos we've been witnessing already all over the country, there is likelihood to be anarchy in Nigeria. So that will meet the threshold. Because when you grant an injunctive relief or injunction, as we call it, whether interim or interlocutory, it is ex parte mostly. Ex parte means to the knowledge of the other party. So it was against the what is it called, the federal government, but they weren't aware at that point in time, obviously. And what the court would do in granting judgment would be to take a particular date, a very short date, to then allow the other party to come to court and come and argue what is called the substantive case itself. So the substantive case will be argued on the 15th. Now, that is the judgment itself. However, the effect of that judgment is that at least until the court is able to then hear the substantive issue on the 15th of February, you are bound to obey the court order. So I listened with a bit of worry what the gentleman was talking about, that, look, whether the CBN was party to the case or not, the CBN of Nigeria, the CBN is an agency of the federal government of Nigeria. So when a judgment is directed against the federal government, it binds all the agencies of the government.
So where is the argument coming from, which is putting out a lot of confusion to so many people that, who say that the Supreme Court's judgment is not binding on the CBN?
All I can say is that I read law differently, maybe in different years, and the gentleman read his own law different, without being insolent, because I don't understand. Whether you are CBN, you are INEC, you anything, even in your bedroom, the law of this country binds you, regardless of if you have any problem with the law, with the judgment of the court, you go back to the court. But you cannot begin to nitpick and say because you are not party to the suit and this and that. No, CBN wasn't party to the suit, yes, but your principal is the federal government of Nigeria.
But you also heard him say that the CBN, the president is not the boss of the CBN governor, even though,
there was a lot of speculation in that segment, and I'm just sort of trying to be a bit malleable here. I had so many speculations, and I don't really pander to speculations. But the truth is, whether the president of Nigeria is the boss of CBN or the boss of INEC or anything, the truth is, he is the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria at the apex, and all these parastatals are under the federal government, which the president, look, it's just what we call vicarious liability in law. Let me just briefly. I'm a principal, you are my agent, I send you on an errand to go and buy maybe pap for me in Yaba. On your way to Yaba, you carry my car, you knock somebody down in the process of going to buy that pap for me in Yaba, and you are sued. I will be vicariously liable for what you have done because you are running my errand at that point in time. It's a different thing if when I send you to Yaba to go and buy pap for me, you deflected and went to Relay on your own frolic, which had nothing to do with where I sent you. On that occasion, I shall not be vicariously liable to your act because you didn't commit the act in the ordinary course of where I sent you. But in this case, you're talking about the CBN taking a policy sanctioned by the president of Nigeria. So the judgment, of course, is a judgment that binds the federal government, including the CBN and all other parastatals included. So don't let's waste time on this.
And in citing the CBN Act, the senior advocate talked about how the approval required by the president on currency redesign by the CBN is only perfunctory. And the question, in relation to that is, how much weight does the approval that the president gives to currency redesign and any other policy relating to the current, how much weight does it carry?
Thank you so much. That's a very interesting question. So Nigeria is, I was talking to an elderly friend of mine a couple of days ago. I said Nigeria is a UFO. It's now an unidentified flying object. Anything goes in Nigeria. You cite it, you don't cite it. We throw a lot of things, into the mix of law sometimes. So the whole idea that the president has, given approval or the approval is just perfunctory is not. What is important is there are constitutional roles for the president, one of which is to give approval to A, B, C, whether it is a general approval or by executive order whatsoever. So the approval cannot be perfunctory. You know, you remember a few weeks ago when I think there was an instance in which somebody said they needed the approval of the president to arrest somebody. I think it was Emefiele they were talking about. I think there was this rumor about arrest, and somebody said, oh, I think the court said you have to go, I think the court told the DSS, if I remember very well, that you have to go and take approval from the from the president to arrest the CBN governor. I said, hell no. You don't need the approval of Mr. President to arrest anybody in this country because it's a constitutional matter. It gives the police in a functional country, in a functional democracy. We are in a different, you know, ball game altogether. But in a country that works, the police can look. The other day, a couple of weeks ago, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the UK, was fined because he was sitting on the back of his car without a sitting belt, without a belt. And ordinary police arrested him and stopped him, and he paid a fine to that. You know, so we're talking about why do you have to go to the president or please, sir? Can you give us permission to arrest? Now, would the DSS need permission of the federal government or president to come and arrest them all up? I say, hell no. So the DSS should need nobody's permission, even if the president appoints and fires people. No question, that's a different ball game. You know, but when it comes to arresting those people that the president appoints to arrest, nobody needs the presidential approval for that. It's the same thing.
It expands the... Okay. It speaks to so many other issues on this particular matter. For instance, there are those, of course, you are very well aware, who are alluding, and perhaps that's where you actually want to go, to the fact that this whole conversation is not just about on the substantive issue of the conversation, but it's all getting into the realm of politics, which is, to many, a little disturbing. Should we be talking politics in such a mix as this? We had a guest yesterday who said, look, this issue is not supposed to be a political issue, it's supposed to be an economic issue. But it would seem like we kind of put everything in the same pot of soup.
Thanks. That's a very, very important question. Look, when there is no information, rumors will fill the gap. And rumors will fill your imagination. Let me say straight away that the whole idea of saying you want to redesign Naira, you know, in order to be able to, you know, absorb Naira and this and that, could be, or in order to promote a cashless economy, on its own, could be a fantastic idea. But you have to look at the implementation. And that is the biggest problem with Nigeria. We don't think things through. Number one, the first question is, and that's coming back to why politics is being thrown into this mix sometimes. Why do you have to implement that about 3-4 months before a major election in the country, in a place that you know you want to promote cashless economy, where 60% of Nigerians don't own bank accounts? This is a statistic coming from the CBN itself. People are in the hinterlands where there are no banks at all. You know, even when you are in the urban areas, you transfer, sometimes your money is hanging, it doesn't drop. And don't just forget, the infrastructure for cashless economy is not just the bank, you have the telecoms, you know, who also runs on. No, do we have the infrastructure in the first place? We haven't got the infrastructure to pilot this through. In some of the best, most developed countries in the world, the UK, US, Germany, and Co., this would take about, when UK was going to do its own, if you want last year, they gave almost 5 or 6 months. And they still said, keep on depositing your old currency. And the old currency and the currency were actually operating side by side until they fizzled it out completely. I'm talking about a country that has all the infrastructure we need. We are in a country that we haven't got 20% or even 10% of the infrastructure we need for that. Then you went up suddenly. I mean, and that has promoted all the speculations. I heard the last gentleman talking about the fact that, oh, this was done because they want to make sure that the politicians don't use money to buy vote. Number one, I haven't seen anything to that effect. If that is the case, there are more sensible ways of doing that. You know, you don't wake up one day and then say 3 months to the election, do this so that we want to suck up. Look, this is what you have done. You've completely imperiled the Nigerians. You told us to surrender our old currencies. We did. The new currencies you promised, you haven't given us. Let me give you an example. As I was driving from Ogun State today to this studio, a gentleman came to do something in my house. And as I was bringing him back to Lagos, he lives in Lagos, and I was going to give him money for how to transfer. He says, I use Zenith, and Zenith has not been going for the past 2 or 3 days, whether you transfer to or you want to receive, so it will be hanging. I had no money in my pocket, but 1,000 Naira. And I'm thinking, okay, what do I do? Thankfully, I used another bank, GTB, and I said, do you have a GTB account? And he gave me his wife's account number. And I was able to. Now, at that point in time, if that guy didn't have an alternative this thing, he has kids. Meanwhile, he was going to another job, and he said the gentleman transferred money to him yesterday. The money had not dropped in because that was one bank to Zenith, as in dropped. And I'm thinking, how did we get here? So the long and short is that the way this is being done leaves a lot of room for speculations and for politics.
Speaking of which, let's break it down. The CBN says it has released the money to the banks, but the banks are not managing it well. The banks are saying that we're challenging the CBN on the quantity released into circulation. We see cash merchants selling cash. POS operators have upped, their percentage charge on withdrawals. What exactly, do you see politics in this? Add to that, we also see banks whose managers have been arrested hoarding the new notes behind old notes in their vaults. Do you see politics in this mix as well? How come this is happening at this time?
You see, this is very disheartening. Because what goes on between, and number one, I have to say straight away on national television, I don't trust a word of Emefiele. I don't trust anything that comes from his mouth. Because, I'm sorry to say, it's shown consistently that at most times it doesn't stand for integrity. And I'll tell you why. You are the CBN governor, and you wanted to run for a political post, the presidency of the country, and you were denied. You are the one who is a custodian of the materials, of the electoral materials in this country, that they are going to be disbursing to different. If you have any modicum of integrity, you should resign. Nobody needed to tell you at that point in time to resign.
There are those who wonder, did he ever really say he wanted to contest?
But he didn't come out to say he didn't want to contest.
Okay.
And if you keep silent in certain circumstances, I could very well infer, consent at that point in time. And I think the noise was so loud enough for him, even if he was deaf, for someone to tell him, this has been impugned on you. You are the central bank governor, for goodness sake. So, and because of that, it's a bit tricky in that. So if he says, I've given money to bankers, commercial banks, they're not releasing money. Look, this is not the business of the average Nigerian, of the common man on the street, of the common woman on the street. They don't care how much you release to the commercial bank. Put your house in order. I was telling somebody yesterday, right, this kind of discussion came up because they were attacking banks in Abuja and this and that. And the person asked me that, was it right to attack the banks? I said, look, it's not right to attack the banks, but you can say that because you are not in the hinterland, because you are not that old woman who is a daily worker, who is going to peddle orange on the street. The money she gets on the street, the cash she gets is what she's going to give to her children when they are going to school in the morning. She's living 300 miles from the city center. I said, look, that is why we call it anarchy. In anarchy, there is no sensibilities, only you are ruled by emotions. So Emefiele should sit with his bankers and resolve this. It's a national calamity. It's a shame to come on national television and say, oh, I release this amount to the people. Oh, I don't release. It is the whole thing that has become seriously politicized. It is an indictment.
Well, that also
on the CBN as an entity.
That's not the only one that old woman whose analogy you just gave is dealing with right now. There are 3 queues people are talking about now. I'm sure you're aware of. Fuel queues,
Naira queues,
cash
or
queues,
ATM queues,
POS queues, all kinds of queues all over the place. And all people hear is an allegation that all of this is political because some of these things haven't happened until now. What's your argument, or are you in favor or against that argument that this is all political to make the government of the day look bad? Because there are those who allege, hey, we haven't really had this kind of experience over the years. Why now?
Well, this is interesting and very tricky. First, the question of whether some people have been arguing that is to make the government, of the day bad. I think we've had that kind of argument from the highest level. I mean, Nasser El-Rufai said that about people in Nasser Rock trying to make sure that a candidate loses and so on and so forth. Look, and then you said this has never happened before. It has happened before, but in teeth and bricks. Only we have never had a convergence of all the queues as we've had now. Before it's been Naira queue or it's been fuel queue. I think the only entity that is not queuing in Nigeria today is INEC. because the INEC chairman came out to tell us, oh, we're going to have the elections, because now we have resolved the Naira and the fuel issues. I was horrified. Are you going to vote for yourself? INEC. It's okay for you to say, oh, we've got Naira now, we've got Naira and we've got fuel. What about the people who are going to vote at the end of the day? Have they got that to be able to vote? But that just shows you the level of insensitivity in government. But that's it's a discussion for another day. But coming back, to that, the queues have happened before. They're going to happen again. But are they political? It's a big question. It's a big question because nobody can say precisely what it is. As I said, if you look at the Naira queue, the policy itself is not a bad policy, obviously, but the timing is greatly flawed. Then the nastiness and the opaqueness around it, leave so much room for people to begin to fill the gaps with imagination. Because, look, to be honest with you, if I were one of the contestants and people need to move from point A to point B when they are going to exercise their, civic right to vote, and suddenly there's no money, they cannot move, they can't procure anything, they cannot even, they have no one to even buy food to be able to eat, to even go. And don't forget, when you go to queue, you queue for 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes, or even longer than that. So you are disenfranchising people from that point of view. Then the same thing, even those who have money, there's no petrol to buy anyway, to be able to move about, to be able to do anything. So what you have on ground today is a panoply of factors that leaves enough room for anybody to say what is going on is political. But I dare say there will be other reasons to it.
It would be remiss of us, to have this conversation without taking it to the president, who has repeatedly restated his commitment to leaving a legacy of free and fair elections. Can that commitment now be viewed independently of the upheaval that is characterizing days to the elections now?
I think the short shrift answer is absolutely not. How do you want to have free and fair elections? If I'm not, look, free and fair election doesn't simply mean that the ballots have been casted and you've counted them. No. You have to look at the processes. It's just like when you talk about justice being done. People confuse justice with judgment. They're different things entirely. If a court pronounces judgment today, and somebody might say, yes, I've got justice. You haven't got justice if the process leading to that has been very traumatic in the first place. When the police arrest you and they detain you longer than what the Constitution allows them to detain you, you've already suffered injustice. So it's a chain completely. So free and fair election is a chain. It's not just casting the ballot itself. Okay. You have made it almost impossible for Nigerians today to breathe, to even think correctly, to even think in a straight manner, to eat, to feed, to do anything. How can those kind of human beings be able then to deliver any election that you call free and fair? It's a big question.
Well, there will be no elections without political parties. And one of the interesting things that we've seen in recent time is a lot of decamping from one party to the other. In fact, we've had all kinds of lists, all kinds of people, coming from one party into another. We took on a guest here saying, look, about 62,000 of his candidates, or of members of his party, had moved from one party to another, and of course he had his say on that one. The natural question would be, exactly what does that mean in the build-up to an election, a major election at that? And no party, none of the major political parties have been exempt in recent time. What does that carry any weight in the build-up to this process, as you call it?
Well, thank you very much, Ayo. That's a very, very interesting question. And if you want to throw into that mix, also is a question of attributions and stuff like that. But let me address the campaign. Nigeria is, to be honest with, as far as I'm concerned, you haven't got political parties in Nigeria. You only got associations of aggregated interests here and there. Because when you have political parties in the proper form they're supposed to be, you can't decamp easily. Now, take as an example, if you're a Democrat in the US, or you are in the Republican Party, or in the UK you are in Labour, or you are in Conservative, certain ideological values define you. You believe in abortion, you don't believe in abortion, you believe in gay rights, you don't believe in gay rights, and this and that. Sometimes your beliefs, if I don't ask you that, Ayo, in the US, where do you belong? which party do you belong? If I ask you your values, do you believe in gay? You said no, or yes. Do you believe in this? Already I can tell myself, Ayo belongs, or Bukola belongs to this particular party. Your values actually sometimes shape the kind of party you belong. But Nigerian political parties across board have no ideological values at all that distinguish one from the other. So because of that, they don't see it as anything significant, just carpet crossing, just like changing I'm wearing a shirt, I'm drinking tea, it's stained, I take it off, I take another shirt. That is what it has become. So people, they camp here, sometimes they camp to go and contest presidency or governorship in another party and this and that. Sometimes your electorate should even worry about that.
Unfortunately, that's what we have right now.
That's what we have. Your electorate should worry about that, about your consistency. Now, look, so the campaign, number one, happens because, A, as I said, there is no ideological values. Number two, political parties even politicians don't think too much of their parties. Their parties are places they go to go and get benefits. Now, let me use myself as an example. I registered in Lagos here as an APC member. I served in an APC government of Governor Ambode in Lagos. And I'm still a card-carrying member of the APC as I talk today. But that doesn't stop me from joining initiatives that are not political parties, but are very, very, forward-thinking. Like one of them was established by Professor Patutomi about 2 years ago, called the National Consultative Front. You had guests here on this platform, NCF. NCF was brilliant. And that idea came when we thought part of the problems we have in Nigeria is that people are put in offices who don't have competencies for it. What if we start the idea of shadow government? Whether you are in any party or not, when you have a minister for education, in the NCF, let's have a shadow minister for education, not affiliated to any party, who will be able to study all the policies on education and this and that. So if one day comes, you are called upon, you already know what all those policies are. So, and I was very happy, and I'm still a member of that NCF. However, some people, when it will be dirty or whatever happened, some people decamped or some people moved from that to join this. I didn't, and many people didn't. I stayed with NCF. And simply because I'm still an APC member, and talking about, so there was, an attribution, I think there was a list published about 3 months ago that some of us are a member of some big tent, which is a policy group of Obidati. I said, no, I'm not a member of that. I work with Patutomi on his NCF. That's
it's an interesting...
No, sorry, just make it. So you were added to...
A list, yeah.
Okay, so, it also raises a question in my mind right now.
Yeah.
So it is possible for a political party to come up with a list of appointees without verifying whether or not they are members of a party.
That happens a lot in Nigeria. That happens a lot. It happens also, sometimes it happens deliberately, I must say. Sometimes it happens genuinely, and sometimes it happens through confusion. Because, for instance, I was in the NCF, for instance, which was long before this B movement or anything happened. But when people moved on to that, they must have imagined, because that list, when I saw the list, was the list of NCF simply adapted to the big tent. And I said, no, whoa. You can't just put me there without my consent. It's not. I'm just giving an example. Maybe I have the opportunity to come here and say, look, I'm an APC member state, APC member. I haven't joined any other thing apart from the APC, But it doesn't mean that those who are free, those who want to join shouldn't join the other. I'm just saying all those things happen. It could have happened genuinely. So it could have happened unintentionally.
You were honorable enough to decline membership of, the other group. But there are other people who could have been drafted into the big tent, without necessarily telling them that, this is my ideological disposition, I would rather not be part of it.
Precisely. I wasn't actually told of that list at all. That my name just appeared in it. When I then looked at it, this was a list of the NCF. How did it become adapted to? But the truth is, people get drafted into all sorts. And maybe not everybody will have the opportunity of me sitting on the TV and saying,
and that brings me to the next point. Some would say, and I've heard this, on conversations on television, some would say that there really is no ideological dividing line between and amongst the presidential candidates that we have on the ballot right now. If you're talking about the PDP presidential candidate, he was formerly in the ACN and then the APC. If you're talking about the Labour Party presidential candidate, he was formerly a PDP member. Even the NNPP presidential candidate was formerly a PDP member. Yeah. So it seems like it's an APC against all PDP contests. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's a fantastic point, Bukola, because you've mentioned all those parties, you haven't mentioned Asiwaju. Asiwaju is the only candidate today who has not crossed from any party to another, just as what you are saying. Somebody moved from PDP to Labour, somebody moved from...
But don't forget that in the 90s,
yes,
they were all, at least a handful of these candidates were all in the SDP as well.
I understand, but then don't forget that SDP went, ACN came. It's a different thing entirely.
Asiwaju was a member of Alliance for Democracy,
AD, precisely, in 1999.
Also,
and he left that one to form the ACN.
That's what I'm saying. ACN to APC. That's what I'm saying. So you can see that consistency of the same party evolving from this to that. Just like when Awolowo was in Egbe Modua, from there became Action Group, basically. What I'm saying is that Asiwaju has done that consistently. I'm not campaigning for anybody here, but just to your question, I'm just saying, if you want to talk about consistency in that way, you are in AD, you move to ACN, then from ACN to APC. There is consistency there. In terms of ideology, then I can see that if there's ideological trend there, because it's a different thing if Asiwaju has moved from, ACN to something to the other side. But he didn't do that. He was consistent from AD to ACN, from ACN to APC. But don't let's waste too much effort on that. In the fact that at least there's consistency there. To that extent, you can say, well, there is at least, if not ideological consistency, there's at least that kind of whatever I hold as my belief in that party. He has held that consistently. And for me, look, this is an open platform. The truth is, when I'm looking today at who should be my president this year, 2023 going on, I'm looking at certain things. There are no angels among men, not among any of the candidates. But I'm looking at who is that candidate that can put together the best and the most formidable team to govern Nigeria, because we need that kind of candidate now, as far as I'm concerned. The president of Nigeria is not somebody who's going to be running around the field on his own or on her own. Will be the person who will harness the best resources and then give them the best supervision.
Incidentally, Nigerians will be recruiting just one person.
Precisely.
Nigerians are going to be employing one individual to govern their lives at the federal level, and 36 others to govern their lives at the states level.
28 this time.
28, okay. Now, so the question for you now is, now you have said what you would be looking out for.
Yeah.
But in the face of prevailing circumstances, you said something very, very important the other time, which is people will be ruled by their emotions when things aren't going in a particular direction.
That's right.
So you are essentially saying at some point, reason goes out the window, emotions rule.
Yep.
What will be your counsel to Nigerians now about this conflict of reason and emotions as we wind down?
Thank you very much. It's a very refreshing question. Look, we don't have a crystal ball today, otherwise we will have all gazed into it to know what is going to come. But my counsel to Nigerians is very simple. We've gone through a hard time, and we are still going through a lot of hard times. Let us look deep into ourselves. As I say, when I was driving in today, and that young man sitting next to me, when we were talking about, this anarchy, this and that, he said, but sir, many people will be happy that we are still alive. And I take pride in that we are still alive. He said, it's only when you are alive that you can be hopeful. So we are alive today, so we can be hopeful. We can be hopeful that Nigeria is going to get better. In doing that, we should not allow ourselves to be too emotional. And you can see emotions already playing out. And it's normal. Again, let's say that it's normal that you are going to have emotions play out in different fields. Different emotions, or somebody is well, somebody is not well, somebody is sick, somebody is not saying this and that. Look beyond all this. Ask yourself some fundamental questions that, as I'm going to be casting my vote come February 25th for the president of the country, which kind of president do I want to see in power? I know the person I'll be voting for. I know the kind of president I want to see in power. I want to see somebody that I know has a track record of bringing the best team together. Because at the end of the day, even if you bring in a 10-year-old to come and govern Nigeria today, he or she is still going to have to work with people.
Even though, Prof, that a number of people would still say we give too much attention to the presidency and not give enough attention to the state governments, because that's another conversation altogether.
Sure.
That is where governance happens. But unfortunately, we are completely out of time now. We have to let you go. Professor Ademola Abbas is a professor of international law as well as a global affairs expert. Thank you again for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We're back after now for more. Please stay with us.
in the armed forces have been following very closely the developments as affect the electioneering process. The police remain the lead agency for election security. I'd like to reassure the commitment of the armed forces to supporting the police in whatever form to ensure that the security for the election is solid and that the INEC chairman, along with members of this commission, conduct their activities without hitch. I believe that this meeting today couldn't have come at a better time to look at what we've done thus far, what gaps do exist, and how we can close them. But above all, I'd like to indeed pledge the commitment of members of the armed forces.
The Commission is invited to brief Council. It is also invited to brief the Council of State. The briefing for the Council of State is going to take place on Friday the 10th. So basically it's about the readiness of the Commission to conduct the elections. So we took members of Council through all the preparations that we have put in place for the election and the few challenges that we are facing and the steps that we have taken to address those challenges. I can tell you two of these challenges quickly. The first one is availability of petroleum products. We had a meeting with the National Union of Road Transport Workers, and they raised that as an issue of concern. Immediately after that meeting, we interfaced with the leadership of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. And right now, there's a technical committee working. The idea is for them to avail us the use of their over 900 land mega stations as well as floating mega stations nationwide for the purpose of stocking products to ensure that the Commission doesn't suffer any encumbrances in movement of personnel and materials for the election. The second one is the currency issue. And again, we had an engagement yesterday with the governor of the central bank, and he assured us that the Commission will not suffer any encumbrances on that score. Fortunately for us, all our accounts, national and state, are held by the Apex Bank. So we raised those challenges, but we have found a solution to those challenges. So be rest assured that the election will hold as scheduled on the 25th of February for national and on the 11th of March for the state elections.
Again, thank you for staying with us. Still on our election education, voter education drive, among other things. Let's welcome Mr. Mike Igeni, who is a former INEC resident electoral commissioner in Akwa Ibom State. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Igeni. Let's begin with the judiciary. Those who are... Yes, good morning. Let's begin our conversation with the role the judiciary has been playing in our electoral process. A number of things that you are not unaware of has been happening. The Oshu case, for instance, which you spoke to, and I remember you also responded to the media saying, look, as far as you're concerned, the judiciary shouldn't be allowed to play certain roles which the electorate or the electoral process is supposed to play. Give us an understanding, since the judgment is out now, and of course, the process of it is still on. What's your initial reaction to that one, and how do we forestall that going forward?
Thank you very much, Ayo, for having me. Democracy is often associated with the rule of law. And in any democracy, the judiciary is one of the most powerful, if not indeed the most powerful arms to which all must bow, so that when there are disputes arising from elections, those matters are taken to court where they are expected to be resolved. But the practice around the world is to ensure that the process of election, which is what people like myself, we are more interested in, the process, and the outcome be determined by the people. And the idea is that we must ensure that when the elections are credible, there will be no need to go to courts. And I often give as an example, Ayo, the situation, what happened in England, that before now, it was the fear about the fact that if courts of law are made to answer political questions, that sooner or later, political class, there will be struggle for the control of the judiciary in England. It was against that background that it decided first that such matters should be dealt with at the parliament. But when they realized that even in parliament, there was no electoral justice because of issue about simple majority in the House of Commons, eventually they resorted back to the court. But because of the fear of that control, they decided way back in 1832 with an enactment to ensure that there was a profound reform so that the will of the people is determined finally and conclusively at the point of election. This is what we have been trying to do here. Therefore, the role of the judiciary is very critical for the survival of any democracy around the world. Now, back home here, are we satisfied with the role of the judiciary so far? I am on record for several years, and that I've been carrying placard in my heart, and this is historical, that the judiciary has not lived up to expectation. I gave people an example of what happened in the First Republic. I gave an example of what happened in 1979. I gave an example of what happened in 1983, when our own icon, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, declared, when he was asked, will you not go to the court? Awolowo said, and I quote him, these are not my words, I will not go to court because the judiciary, according to him, will not give electoral justice. And that was why he refused to go. That has been the pattern. Recall that the June 12th that was aborted started at the doorstep. Of course, the politician will start it, they will go to the judiciary. At the end of the day, everything ended up and aborted, such that on the 23rd of June, when the notice, the press statement to annul June 12 was released, it was said that the June 12 had to be annulled in order to save the judiciary for anarchy. This is what they have said. Now, fast forward, where we are today. For a very long time, for a very long time, internal party democracy had been under life support. That was why there was massive effort by all Nigerians, the National Assembly, and the President signed the 2022 Electoral Act to ensure that for a political party to conduct primary, you must give 21-day notice. That was section 82 of the Act. And that INEC under 84 must monitor, and that such persons must emerge from valid primaries. The outcome of the judgment we have seen so far is finally has put a dead nail to this section. In fact, what has happened is what we call the interment of section 82, section 84, section 29 of the current Act. So for me, going forward, my concern is this, and this is that in a democracy, just
a quick one, Mr. Guinea, just to be clear, I mean, going by the recommendations that were the citations that you have done from the Electoral Act, I just want to find out if you think, I mean, conclusively, that, you know, that's exactly what the judgment says, because speaking to a lawyer yesterday, you may have listened to us, he was saying that, look, as far as he is concerned, whatever position the party takes on the primaries is what holds. So if a party says we are holding this particular primaries at a particular place or in a particular place, the INEC is bound to be there. If INEC does not attend that primary, as far as they are concerned, they go ahead with that position. That's, according to him, is the response to which the court gave to this particular matter at hand, that INEC didn't monitor Not because INEC was not informed, but because INEC refused to attend because, as far as INEC was concerned, another primary had been held. What's your take on that?
Ayo, the return to the domestic affair political parties, which is what this lawyer you are referring to has talked about, is a tragedy in our democracy. It was in the case of Onwoha versus Okafor in 1983 that the Supreme Court, as per Obaseki JSC as he was then, in interpreting the Section 83 of the 1982 Electoral Acts, in interpreting that section, that stated clearly, unequivocally, that when there's a dispute between a candidate as to who is to be the candidate of a party, that section specifically provided that records should be had to the leaders and their decision will be final. It was against that background that the lead judgment read by Obaseki, which was the judgment of the court, was to the effect that having regard to that particular provision, the court will have nothing to do. However, the current act, we have moved away from that long time ago. The current act, first and foremost, Ayo, let me quickly say this here. All the jurisprudence with respect to the interpretation of the Repeal Act are no longer applicable with respect to the current 2022 Electoral Act. Now, let me say this here, that if our democracy is based on the rule of law, it meant that political party leaders must respect first their internal members. The fact that it's an affair of political party that INEC required to monitor does not mean that you would not, adhere to the procedure. Let me clear the issues about whether INEC refusal to monitor or not monitor. First and foremost, it should be noted that a primary election is a generic process that has the constituent elements of the following. One, you must buy a nomination form. When you buy that nomination form, you must fill it. After there's a time for closure. After the closure, there'll be a committee to screen people. The people you are referring to that the court has given ticket now, were they ever screened by any committee for senatorial elections? The answer is emphatic no. Those who were screened, their names were sent to the commission. Now, with respect to notice, Section 82 is clear that you must give what you call 21 days notice. Now, Ayo, in respect of these matters that have taken Nigeria back to where we used to be before, is the fact that the primary election for senatorial was on the 27th of May. That of presidential was in June, 2 separate months that this event took place. Now, when they said they canceled the first primary, who canceled it? What was the reason for the cancellation? And when they said they want to hold another one on the 9th of June, the notice they are talking about, we were at the commission's meeting on the 8th and on the 9th. 9th was the last day on account of INEC shifting extension from on the 3rd of June to on the 9th. Presidential primary ended on the 8th. The whole world, Nigerians, the entire empirical world, saw the actors who were in the presidential contest right now. So on the 9th, which was around 8 o'clock, I got a call. I was still in Abuja after our meeting. In the 9th, Ayo, that there was going to be a primary, what I call a Nicodemus primary. In the 9th, the question is, does that meet the requirement of 21 days notice? Because you say you have canceled the previous one. If you canceled it, you must give what you call 21 days notice of another primary that you want to conduct, which of course is not even possible, having regard to the timetable. In APC versus Garfield, the Supreme Court of the Federal Republic of Nigeria stated clearly that no political party can extend the timeline that have been fixed for election. In this so-called Nicodemus June 9 primary senatorial they call rerun didn't meet the requirement of 21 days. It was in the night, conducted in the night. What about the other candidate? So I think that my concern, Ayo, these are clear facts known that if we are in a democracy, those who didn't participate in political party primaries are now being given the tickets. And this is so notorious. The whole world saw this happen. For me, it is what is now become a past tense, in the sense that the Supreme Court of any country, like our own, is one that we lawyers literally say that it is the one that can make a man a woman and make a woman a man. However, even though we're going to bar, we have not lost our sense of justice, our sense of sanity with respect to that. The only implication, that the only worry I have is for the future, because this judgment had implication for the future. And so for me, really, Ayo, I believe that in our democracy, the judiciary must be able to call justice by its true name.
Well, sorry, Mr. Guinea, just 1 second. A quick follow-up on an issue that you raised on Section 82(1) of the Electoral Act. Section 82(1) says the Commission shall be given the 21 days notice. 82(2) does not mandate the Commission to attend, because 82(2) says the Commission may, with or without prior notice to the political party, attend.
No. Ayo, one of the things that we lawyers do is that we don't read a section of a constitution in isolation of another specific, what do you call a provision. So you must have what you call a community reading. So by way of community reading, go to section 84, subsection 1, which says that a political party intending to field a candidate shall conduct party primaries that shall be monitored by the Independent National Electoral Commission. If you go down to subsection 13 or 12, you will see that where they fail to comply, when you have to submit the list of candidates under section 29, the law says that such individual must emerge from valid primaries. Are we saying, Ayo, that people who participate, it would be a different thing if, for example, the presidential election was the one that came first, that is primaries or convention. Thereafter, we now had what we call senatorial by June, in which case, if a party feels that indeed it needed more viable individual to be in the Senate, they would have had that opportunity. But that opportunity was no longer possible. All these individuals we are talking about, they violated section 115. I am told that somebody came to your station. I was saying that some of us did not read the law very well. I think that the guy who says so is the one who is not fully apprised of the import of that section 115. The very crisis we are in today, this issue we are discussing now, which for me really is academic, because Supreme Court has spoken, these guys are already candidate and all of that, is the reason what wanted to stop by ensuring that you have section 115 to preclude individuals from filling two different constituency elections by that nomination. However, I know that because of the illegal drafting, what sometimes I refer to in my book, which is in the work, I refer to a statute capture or statute sabotage. What happened was that when you go to the definition section, you are likely to be misled by the wrong definition given as to who is a candidate, which according to them, you must have been first come out of primary, and it is the form that INEC gives to you that constitute that you cannot fill two forms. Ayo,
so Mr.
Bukola, may I ask you?
Mr.
Let me just land on this. Ayo, Bukola, once you have emerged as a candidate, will it not be stupid, preposterous of anybody to go and fill two forms? No, the forms you are referring to were the forms that they bought with so much millions, not the form that INEC will do, which is free. That form is free. That is not the form that is referred to under section 115, subsection D, because nobody will, recklessly go and fill two forms after you have emerged. What is desperation from? The desperation that will try to cure the mischief, which is what is going on now. was that if, for example, these guys follow the rule of the law as stipulated, we will not be where we are today, is to preclude people who intend to be candidates from buying nomination forms. That is what we meant. So,
Mr. Guinea, let me just come in there. Pardon me, Mr. Guinea. So would you agree then that the inelegant drafting, using your words, is what is responsible for the shadow of doubt that has now been cast on Section 115 of the Electoral Act as amended? Because the lawyers on the program yesterday say you can't interpret Section 115 without recourse to the Electoral Act, to how the Electoral Act also defines who a candidate is.
You know, Bukola, I just told you about what you call statute sabotage and statute capture. Section 31 of the Repeal Act was a good example of statute sabotage. That section says that submit list of candidates, which will now have that section 29. That was the original text. When we came on board, and we pointed out to the political class the import of that and the need for them to do proper primary. You know what they did? With what happened in Cross River State, they simply went, removed the full stop and added a proviso with an omnibus expression that whatever list of candidates submitted by a political party, that INEC cannot reject for any reason whatsoever. That's what we suffer for a very long time. Now, this section 115, beyond that definition, all right, with our canon of interpretation, if the ordinary meaning, ordinary reading of the text does not convey the meaning to you and other, you must deploy what we call the mischief rule. What was the mischief that section intended to cure? That section, Bukola, was intended to ensure the very thing that is happening now, that those who participated in presidential primary convention have now been returned back again to go and contest what you call it senatorial. That is impossible. That's what we wanted to cure. That's what we wanted to cure. But regrettably,
Mr. Guinea, the jury is out on whether or not that mischief has been cured, which is why many are lamenting the Supreme Court judgment on the Lawan and Machina case. By extension, also, you could cite others, that of the former minister of the Niger Delta Affairs and candidate in Akwa Ibom State. They're also even citing that of the Imo State, where the governor, current governor, emerged. And now, by extension, defining these politicians or executives as Supreme Court appointees rather than being duly elected from the ballot. So, Mr. Guinea, as a result, what do you recommend to be the solution to this legal conundrum? Because you've cited over and over again the case of England, where reforms had to be introduced into the system. So would you say that there should be a judicial ceiling where cases of election petitions should get to? Would that be the solution to this challenge?
No, that is not the problem. We don't have problem with that, Bukola. I don't think that the issue about primaries already matter that ought to have ended since June. That's not where we should be right now. And that's why I told you that it's mere academic exercise. And I just told you here that the first efforts, the rule of law, is the first victim of the subversion of democracy. Lebisky and Zipler, in their recent work, How Democracy Died, they made it clear that when political class repudiates, rejects the norms and values on which democracy is practiced, that democracy will die. If the arbitrariness of political party leaders are not curbed by the court standing tall, demonstrating courage, demonstrating fearlessness, independence, clearly our democracy will be in trouble. This is where we are right now.
Well,
now,
Mr. Guinea,
there are two schools of thought.
My apologies, Mr. Guinea. Just a second. Just a second.
For solution.
Yes. We really, I mean, you've nailed that one as far as I'm concerned, and let's just leave this because there are so many other things I would like you to educate us on. You've said that the courts have to play a role in curbing the excesses of political parties. I guess that's another conversation for another time. But I'd like you to take us through the election policy flow and execution. Yesterday we featured two gentlemen from INEC talking about voter education and the role of the technology, of the equipment that's going to be used, mainly beavers. But take us through the flow, what people should expect, what role INEC is going to play, what role we are going to play as a people, what the flow is so that people know exactly how to approach it.
Well, if you can put it on, we can put it on so that Nigerians can see it very well. That pyramid that I have sent to you, which I said to put on so that Nigerians can see clearly. This is to show to you, if you look at the pyramid, you look at the top, you see the chief National Returning Officer of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, with respect to presidential election. And of course, next, you see the headquarters itself. The next to that is the INEC state offices, and you have the local government, which is the blue column. Beyond that blue column, down to the bottom, you can see the base. INEC is going to engage about 1 million people, if not more. But the total staff of INEC that have been preparing for this election, they are not up to 20,000. What that means in part, because when you get to the local government level, at the point of what you call supervising presiding officers, these are not core INEC staff. These are staff to be drawn for federal agencies who, you know, the process like exchange of batting. They are going to be the ones that will be in charge of the ballot papers, the result sheets, and who will not deliver same to the presiding officer. The point being made here is that the success of any election is a reflection of the collective value of that society. If the enthusiasm that we have seen so far, that is going to surpass whatever we have seen in the history of our country, will be anything that we should be happy about. What is has shown that this election, its success or failure, will be entirely in the hands of Nigeria, the Nigerians, because from the SPO, local government election officers, registration area officers, the presiding officers, presiding officer, they are all Nigerian citizens. One interesting thing about this chart I'm showing to you here, looking at the register of voters that we have now, ION, what is very clear is that just as you have the youth between ages 18 to 34, 35 to 49, constituting over 70 plus million on that register. If you look at the base, you also find out that it's also the youth that are also going to be in charge of this election. Therefore, anybody who is doing anything trying to trouble Mr. Chairman, trouble National Commissioner, a rep, or an electoral officer, there's nothing they can do for anybody on election day. What you are seeing is election day pyramid. That is the point we're trying to make here, that the success of this election is clearly in your hands, Nigerian, that the polling units are not the places where election will be won. That is the point with respect to that flow, to show that everything is in the hands of Nigeria to determine. And they must keep faith and keep date with history on the 25th of February and on the 11th of March, respectively. That is what that flow is all about.
Pick up on something you mentioned, Mr. Guinea, while you were making your earlier point about Section 82(1) concerning the notice that parties have got to give to INEC, and where it talks about every registered political party shall give the Commission at least 21 days notice of any convention, congress, and the likes. Now, I think we heard you say that if that starts and then they stop, they have to give fresh 21-day notice. But there are many who think otherwise. They think that even the courts recognize that when you give the 21 days notice and the process begins, if you reschedule, you do not have to give fresh 21-day notice, because that's the impression they get from you, that you are saying that they have to give fresh 21 days notice. Is that your point?
Correctly. You see, the event of on the 27th was a concluded event. They themselves said it was cancelled. No reason given for the cancellation. You cannot just cancel a primary. In fact, it is very clear. Section 33 is very clear of the Act that no political party can change a candidate that emerged for primary. You can read it. It's there. Now, if event has been concluded and you say you want to do another one, you are required to give 21 days notice. That is compulsory. You must give it. Except in case of Section 34. Section 34, where the act was explicit with respect to voluntary withdrawal or death, like what happened a few days ago, last week in Abia, in which case it requires another just 14 days notice. 14 days notice, where the views being expressed wrongly.
I get that point, but what I'm asking is, if the process starts, having given the commission the 21 days required notice, why do they have to give, or do they have to give a fresh 21-day notice if they continue the process where they started with?
Chamberlain, that process of 27th of May had been completed and report had been written. It's a completed process, completed acts. Otherwise, you could say that why would you now require another 14 days? Because it is not a continuous thing. You must give a fresh notice. That is why, as a matter of fact,
so I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this from a broad perspective. If a party starts that process and then they say, well, we are rescheduling this process, will they be required to give the commission a fresh 21-day notice?
When did you give the notice of rescheduling? Let me inform. There's a timeline. INEC gave timeline for that exercise. That timeline, according in the Supreme Court case of APC vs. Carfi, Supreme Court was very clear that no court in the land can extend the timeline given by INEC. And that's why I'm worried, Chamberlain. Some of the orders being given by some court. You cannot be given fresh order for the conduct of fresh primaries outside the timeline, because there's a consequence. We are where we are today, Chamberlain, that we are in a permissive society. There are no consequences for wrongdoing. I have not seen any country around the world where we have to beg citizens to do the right thing. Society make progress on the basis of sanction and reward. Where a party fails to do what they ought to do within that time, the consequence is that you will not have a candidate for election. That is the consequence. It is my humble view, a strong one indeed, that the Supreme Court, the court of the land, should give meaning and purpose to the ballot as the best means of the expression of the will of the people in a democracy, by calling justice by its true name. Today, the judiciary that was so audacious, that was very bold, under the military.
Yeah, but Mr. Guinea,
we are not seeing that happening at the moment.
Is at what point is the process, still regarding Section 84, at what point is it said to have been completed? I mean, some argue that a process is not completed until the party sends the nomination lists to INEC. Isn't that the case?
And that's why I told you that election is a generic process that has what we call constitutive element, one after the other, one after the other. Now, please, I raised some fundamental question. I don't know why you have not abated your mind to that. Were these two people ever screened as senatorial candidates during the timetable? They were never screened. Were their names sent to the state offices around the country that they were going to be candidates? The answer is emphatic no. Did they swear to affidavit attached to their senatorial forms and published at the time they were required to do so? The answer no. So please, let's go back. Look, you don't climb the tree from the top. You climb the tree from the bottom. What has happened is represent the greatest level of democratic discredit of our democracy.
Well, you've said that all of this is an academic exercise because the verdict of the Supreme Court has already been given. And as far as you lawyers say, you say it is an infallible decision. The Supreme Court is the final court of jurisdiction. I just want to take your mind to something that is about to occur, which is the elections we have at hand. We saw the INEC chairman speak and say that he had briefed the Federal Executive Council, and I think he's also set to brief the Council of State at a meeting on Friday. And all of this is geared towards assuring them about INEC's preparedness for the elections. Do you have any fears whatsoever? Because he said after he briefed them, they were assured That for me was very telling. I was wondering, you know, has there been any reason why people should be afraid that the polls might not take place as scheduled?
As at the last time I checked the timetable and schedule of activity that were released by Commission over a year ago, INEC have completed about 12 out of, they are already at 14 out of 12 out of the 14 or so. They have done that. Now, with respect to the issue about fuel scarcity, you all know that on election day, Nigerians, all of you, you have to just take a walk to where you register to vote. Of course, you are in essential duty. I'm sure you are going to be on the program, so you need fuel. But essentially on that day, it's only INEC vehicles that we needed petrol to go about. In any case, I've worked for 10 years. We never found a situation where a vehicle had to fill its tank twice during the course of just taking people to the polling unit, having to stay there for reverse logistics. No, fuel for use are available, as assured, having met with the GMD of NMPC. I think the only thing that is left is that the issue about the CBN, issue the cash scarcity and all of that, those who also want to vote and all that, they also have to leave. And I think that, as I said before on this program when we started, that those who are going to sabotage this policy, which I support wholeheartedly because I am for a cashless electoral process, particularly on election day. But for the Nigerian people, all of us who need cash, you know, to be able to do a few things, particularly those in the rural area and all of that, I think that the CBN should ensure that they should go and service more the rural area. After all, you and I, we can do with a transfer process, you know. But I think that basically there is no basis to say they want to shift the election. And I think that the chairman was very clear as to the fact that on the 25th and on the 11th of March, election to hold as planned.
Well, so, Mr. Igini, just before we go, because we have very few minutes to go on this program now, well, you sent a number of other things just to inform Nigerians generally. Speak to us about this two-thirds thing. Why does it seem like there is some confusion as far as the number of people are concerned about this whole idea around the two-thirds majority of local governments as required?
Yes, if you can put out the table there, this is very important. We must move away from what happened in highly contested elections like this. It is better, all of us, to know what's required to declare the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. If we can have the two tables there, you know, which of course I've also made available to my former commission, is very important. First, you need to take 25%. Now, this is with respect to states. If you look at this table, it is INEC to now deal with this, to come out with the final position. Hold on to this table first. Now, I want to speak to this table. This table, it shows that in each state, you need require 25% in what is the two-thirds? What constitutes two-thirds of Abia State that has what you call 17 local government? From what you could see here, mathematically, those of you who are good in maths, you can see that out here. It is now 11.3. Can you fractionalize a local government? So which one is the commission going to take? Is it upper limit or lower limit? So in a whole of 20, for example, look at Bauchi State, look at Bayelsa, look at Benue, Gombe. All of these ones that have what they call fraction. To avoid what happened in 1979, it is for the commission to take a decision, whether you are taking upper limit or lower limit. Now, and this goes about, how many of them? About 21 states where we have this 21 states. Now go to the second table quickly. Now the second table is one that is very clear. Two-thirds that is required in each of the states is very clear. That's the second table. Now this about 12 states. If you look at Adamawa, it has 21 local government. It gives you just 14 local government where you must score 25%. That is very clear, unambiguous. So a returning officer should not be confused on that day. Voters, those who are campaigning, you now know that it's actually 14 that you require. Please take it forward. Now you find out that, yes, Federal Capital Territory, you need 4. Imo State, you need 18 because it has 27 local government. Imo, Jigawa, Kebbi. And both of them, you require, no, Imo, Jigawa, they are 27 local government respectively, 18 local government. Now, any state where anybody will be declared, you must less than 18 local government. 17, 16, anybody declared beyond this one is unconstitutional. Is unconstitutional. That is what is very clear. So 13 states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as we are going for this election, it is very clear what to require. The rest of the first table, what to require is for the INEC to now come out with a final decision on that, so that we don't need to go to court. I say this because in the United States of America, Chamberlain, Ayo, Bukola, Mankwe, you all know that of the entire 285 delegates, you need to score 270 and not 70 point something to be declared a president of the United States of America. This has to be made clear to everybody, so that somebody think that happened in 2019 and back where some people were declared without meeting the constitutional threshold. It should never happen in our country again.
Okay, well, Mr. Egini, again, as I always say, every time we have to engage you, it's always election 101, or I don't even know whether to call it 401 now.
We didn't have time for the beavers.
We never really, but don't worry, you know very well that we're going to have to come back to that another time. We had a conversation around beavers yesterday, but for now, we have to thank you very much for the privilege of your perspectives this morning. Mike Egini is a former INEC resident electoral commissioner with Akwa Ibom State. Thank you again for your time this morning.
Thank you, Ayo.
All right, our comments now. We have a first one.
Yes, let's start with Yinka Olaniyo, who is concerned about the Supreme Court judgment. And he says, in my opinion, the CBN or commercial banks do not have to be joined in the suit. The Supreme Court decision is binding on Nigeria as a country, and that includes you, me, and all who transact with the Naira, even if we were not joined in the suit. It's a national pronouncement, and CBN is part of the country.
Well, this one is from Ibrahim Yabuwat, who says about the Naira redesign, CBN's action should be commended and not condemned. Kidnapping for ransom has dropped. Armed robbery dropped. Politics is not polluted with money. The suffering of Nigerians involves both the rich and the poor, so solutions will be quick.
Well, Joseph Oludare says, how can you derive joy from the sufferings of Nigerians? The CBN's policy is good, but there is no law that says it must be implemented in February. Spread the implementation alongside the old notes. The same way the old 100 Naira notes gradually phased off, we cannot set Nigeria ablaze because of a policy. Now, some banks cannot even open for business. This is fast threatening national security, he says.
And this one is from Musa Mohammed, who says it's obvious the policymakers are not, I believe he means in tune with what the masses are going through. The dilemma is far from election. Nigerians are suffering. Simple. Cashless policy won't work without infrastructure. Until date, we have 45% of places in Nigeria without network.
All right, then. So there you go. That is the show today, the 2023 verdict. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Thank you. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
And from this side of the divide, thank you for sharing your morning with us. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
And still with Channels Television, the 2023 Verdict Studio opens again later on tonight. I'm Aya Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day.